In the golden palace of Zarwan, a quiet maid named Layla Nasri had served the most feared Alpha in the eastern sands for 6 years without ever being seen, until the night Sheikh Rashid al-Khattab ordered her to dance for him in the costume of a courtesan. And the moment her hand touched his chest, both their amber eyes glowed with a fated mate bond no Alpha had ever been told no by. But Layla told him no, and the bond she rejected was the only thing keeping her hidden power asleep. Welcome to our channel. Tell us where you're listening from today. The palace of Zarwan rose from the desert like a dream the sand had forgotten to swallow. Its walls were gold at sunset, white at noon, and silver beneath the moon, and inside its arched corridors moved a quiet woman whose name very few cared to remember. Layla Nasri had served in those halls for 6 years. She had carried trays heavier than her arms, swept floors longer than her hopes, and folded silks into chests she would never be allowed to open. She kept her eyes lowered. She kept her voice softer than the falling of dust. And she kept her secret buried deeper than any well in the eastern sands. She was 23 years old. She had been an orphan since the night the sandstorm took her village, and she remembered nothing of her parents except a song her mother used to hum when the lanterns flickered. The other servants whispered that she was strange, that she did not eat much, that she did not sleep when the moon was full, that sometimes when she walked past a closed door, the lamps inside flared a little brighter, as if greeting her. They said these things behind her back, and Layla pretended not to hear, because pretending was the only freedom a maid in the palace was allowed. The Sheikh of Zarwan was Rashid al-Khattab, Alpha of the Crescent Pack, and ruler of every grain of sand from the river to the cliffs. He was 31, unmarried, and rumored to have torn 3 rival Alphas apart with his bare hands during the border wars. He was tall and broad and beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful, with dark skin like polished bronze, a beard trimmed close to his jaw, and hair as black as the desert at midnight. His eyes were amber, the color of honey held against fire. He rarely smiled. He never raised his voice. He did not need to. When Rashid al-Khattab spoke, the palace listened, and when he was silent, the palace held its breath. Layla had served him exactly twice before the night everything changed. Once when she was 16 and brought tea to his study, trembling so badly the cup rattled against the saucer, and he had not even looked up from his maps. And once when she was 20 and replaced the candles in his chamber while he stood on the balcony with his back to her, his shoulders carved out of moonlight. Both times she had left as quickly as her feet could carry her. Both times she had not breathed properly for an hour after. But on the 7th night of the 7th month, the head housekeeper found her in the kitchens and told her, in a voice that allowed no argument, that the Sheikh had requested a new servant for his private chambers. The previous girl had been dismissed. Layla would take her place, starting tonight. "Why me?" Layla whispered, though she already knew it did not matter. "There are dozens of girls more suited." "Because he asked for the quiet one," the housekeeper said. "He said he wanted someone who would not chatter, someone who would not stare, someone who would do as she was told." Layla nodded because nodding was safer than speaking. She washed her face in cold water. She braided her long black hair. She put on the deep blue tunic the housekeeper handed her, and she walked through the palace toward the Sheikh's private wing, with her heart beating so loudly she was certain the guards could hear it through her chest. The doors to his chamber were carved with crescent moons. 2 guards opened them without a word, and Layla stepped inside. The room was vast, mosaic floors in 100 shades of blue, lanterns swaying gently from the ceiling on chains of brass. A fountain in the corner, water whispering over stones, cushions of silk and velvet scattered across a low platform, and at the far end, standing beside a tall window framed by silver curtains, stood Rashid al-Khattab himself. He turned slowly when he heard her enter, and Layla forgot for a moment how to bow. His amber eyes found hers across the room, and something inside her chest gave a sharp, painful twist, as if a string had been pulled. He did not greet her. He did not ask her name. He simply gestured toward the center of the floor with one ringed finger and said, in a voice quiet as a blade unsheathed, "Dance for me." Layla froze. "Your Highness, I am not a dancer. I am only a maid. I was told to—" "I know what you were told." His amber eyes held her without mercy. "I am telling you something different now. Dance." "Sheikh al-Khattab, please. Are you refusing me?" The room seemed to grow smaller. Layla swallowed. Behind him the lanterns flickered, and she felt, though she could not say how, that they were flickering for her. That something inside her was answering the lanterns the way a mirror answers light. She lowered her eyes to the mosaic floor and forced her trembling hands to be still. Then, because she had no other choice, she stepped to the center of the room and began to move. She did not know that the moment her bare foot touched the blue tiles, the lanterns above her would burn brighter than they had in 100 years, and that the Alpha watching her was about to feel something his wolf had been searching for since the day he was born. Layla had never danced for a man before. She had danced only once in her life, and only for herself, on a night when she was 15, and the moon was so bright over the servants' quarters that she could not sleep. She had crept onto the rooftop and let her body move the way her mother's song moved inside her chest. She had felt then, just for a moment, that she was something more than a maid, something more than an orphan, something that the desert remembered. That memory was the only thing she had now. So she pulled it forward like a veil and let it cover her, and her body began to move beneath the lanterns of the Alpha's chamber. Her arms rose slowly, her wrists turning the way water turns over a stone. Her hips swayed in small, careful arcs. Her bare feet whispered against the blue mosaic, and the silver bells on her ankle chains every palace maid wore, though no one had ever asked her to dance in them, began to chime softly with each step. She kept her eyes closed because if she opened them, she would have to see him, and if she saw him, she would stop. Rashid al-Khattab did not move. He stood by the window with his arms crossed, his amber eyes fixed on the woman dancing in the center of his chamber, and for the first time in his 31 years, his wolf was entirely silent. Not asleep, not bored, silent in the way a hunter is silent when it sees something it has been waiting for its whole life. The Alpha felt his own heartbeat slow until it matched the rhythm of her bells. He felt the air in the room thicken. He felt the lanterns above her grow warmer, brighter, as though they too were leaning toward her. "She is only a maid," he told himself. "She is only a quiet girl with sad eyes. She is nothing." His wolf answered him with a single word that rolled through his blood like distant thunder. Mate. Rashid clenched his jaw. He had heard of fated bonds. He had read about them in the old scrolls his grandfather kept locked away. He had even believed once that he might find his someday. But he had not expected her to be a kitchen girl in a palace tunic, dancing barefoot with her eyes closed because she was too afraid to look at him. He had not expected her at all. Layla felt the song inside her ending. She slowed. Her arms drifted down. Her last step brought her closer to him than she had meant to come, and when she finally opened her eyes, she found him standing 2 paces away. She had not heard him cross the room. She did not know how long he had been that close. "Your Highness," she breathed, and she lowered her head at once. "Forgive me, Look at me." It was not a command shouted from a throne. It was quieter than that, heavier than that. Layla lifted her eyes. His amber gaze caught hers and held it, and the world tilted. Something inside her chest woke up. Something inside her chest had been sleeping for 23 years, and now it stretched and opened its eyes and looked back at him through her own. She did not understand why her hand was rising. She did not understand why her fingers were reaching toward him. She only knew that her palm pressed flat against the embroidered front of his dark robes, exactly above his heart, and that the moment her skin touched the fabric grew warm. His amber eyes brightened first. They glowed, not blazed, only glowed, the way a candle glows behind a paper screen, soft and steady and impossible to mistake. And then her own eyes, which had always been the color of dark coffee, shifted. Layla saw them in the polished surface of a brass tray on the wall, amber, faintly luminous, the color of honey held against firelight. The room went still. The lanterns above them did not flicker. The fountain in the corner did not whisper. Even the desert wind beyond the windows seemed to pause. Rashid's hand came up and closed gently over hers, pinning her palm against his chest. His own heart pounded beneath her fingers like a drum in a war camp. "Mate," he said, and his voice cracked around the word, as if he had never spoken it before in his life. Because he had not. Layla pulled her hand back as if she had touched flame. "No," she said. The word came out of her before her mind had time to choose it. "No, no, that cannot be. I am no one's mate. I am a maid. You are mine." The two words struck the air between them like a hammer striking stone. Layla took a step backward. Her amber eyes were already fading, dimming, returning to brown, but she could feel the bond now, a glowing thread between her chest and his, warm and golden and humming with a music she had never been taught and somehow already knew. "I will find a way to break it," she heard herself say. Rashid's brows drew together. "What did you say?" "I said I will find a way to break it." Her voice shook, but she did not look away. "Forgive me, Your Highness. I cannot be more than your servant. I will not be more than your servant. I will find a way to sever this, and you will be free of me, and I of you." She turned and fled through the carved doors before he could speak again, and behind her, in the chamber lit by lanterns that suddenly burned twice as bright, Sheikh Rashid al-Khattab smiled for the first time in 7 years, because no alpha had ever been told no by his fated mate, and the wolf inside him had decided in that exact heartbeat that he wanted her more than the throne, more than the desert, more than air. Layla did not sleep that night. She sat on the narrow cot in the servants' quarters and stared at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. The tips of her fingers still felt warm where they had pressed against his chest. She could still feel the bond, faint now, like a string tied around her sternum and pulled taut toward another room of the palace. When she breathed, she felt his breath answer somewhere far away. When her heart skipped, she felt his skip with it, half a beat behind. By the time the muezzin's call rose over the city at dawn, she had made up her mind. She would go to the old woman in the spice market who knew things no one else knew. She would ask how to cut a fated bond. She would pay whatever price was asked. And then she would go on being what she had always been, invisible, useful, and free. But Layla had underestimated one thing. She had underestimated him. The next morning, a guard was at her door. He did not knock. He simply stood there, hands behind his back, and told her that the Sheikh required her presence in his chamber at the hour after sundown, and every hour after sundown for as long as he wished it. Her duties in the kitchens were dismissed. She was to dance, only dance. The housekeeper would assign someone else to fold the silks and carry the trays. Layla was now, by direct order of Sheikh Rashid al-Khattab, his personal dancer. "Tell him no," Layla whispered. The guard did not even blink. "I will not tell him no, girl, and neither will you." So she went. Because there was no other answer she was permitted to give, and because though she would have died before admitting it. The bond inside her chest tugged her forward like a child pulling at her hand. That night she danced again. He stood by the same window. He watched her with the same impossible stillness. When she finished, she kept her distance. She did not touch him. She did not look at him. She bowed and turned to leave. "Layla!" She stopped at the door. He had never said her name before. The way he said it now, low and careful, like a man tasting a fruit he had never been allowed, made the bond in her chest pulse so hard she had to brace one hand against the carved wood. "Yes, Your Highness." "Tomorrow, same hour." "Yes, Your Highness." "And the night after?" "Yes, and every night after that." She did not answer. She slipped through the doors and ran. This pattern held for 3 weeks. He commanded. She danced. He watched. She fled. He never raised his voice. He never tried to touch her again. He did not need to. The bond between them was doing the work for him, growing, deepening, twisting itself tighter around her ribs every time she stepped into his chamber, and tighter still every time she stepped out. She could feel his moods now. She could feel his frustration when council meetings ran long. She could feel the slow, steady warmth of his attention any time she crossed his mind, which seemed to be most hours of the day. And worst of all, she could feel his patience. He was waiting for her. He was waiting the way the desert waits for rain, without hurry, without doubt, as if the rain had no choice but to come eventually, and he had all the centuries in the world. The old woman in the spice market laughed in Layla's face when she finally found the courage to ask. "Break a fated bond, child. You may as well ask me how to break the sky. There is no knife sharp enough. There is no spell strong enough. The only thing that breaks a true mate bond is death, and even then, only sometimes. Whoever he is, you belong to each other now. The sooner you accept it, the less it will hurt. And if I refuse—" The old woman's smile faded. "Then it will hurt forever, child. Forever. The bond does not care about your pride. It only cares that you are joined." Layla walked back to the palace with her chest aching, as if she had run for miles. She did not know yet that the old woman was wrong about one thing. There was something inside Layla strong enough to challenge a mate bond. It had been sleeping inside her since the night the sandstorm took her village, and it was beginning, very quietly, to wake. That same evening, Rashid stood on his balcony and watched the moon rise over the dunes. His advisor, Tariq, stepped out beside him, a parchment in his hand and a frown on his face. "My Sheikh, the scouts report movement at the eastern border. Raiders, 40 men, perhaps 50. Banners we do not recognize." Rashid's amber eyes narrowed. "How close?" 2 nights' ride, maybe less." "Double the patrols. Move the children of the southern villages into the inner walls, and Tariq—" "Yes, my Sheikh." "Tell no one of this. Not yet. I do not want her frightened." Tariq did not need to ask who her was. The whole palace had begun to whisper about the quiet maid who danced for the Alpha every night, and who sometimes, when she walked past a lantern, made the flame stand a little taller. That night, while Layla danced beneath the lanterns and refused once more to meet his eyes, Rashid made a silent promise to his wolf, that before the raiders reached the palace, before any harm came near her, he would mark her as his mate. Even if he had to chase her through every corridor of the kingdom to do it. Rashid al-Khattab had not become an alpha by accident. He had become one because he was patient and ruthless, and because he understood something most rulers never learned, that the things worth having were never things that could be taken. They had to be chosen. And so, on the night after Tariq brought him news of the raiders, he changed his strategy. Layla arrived at the chamber expecting the same silent watching, the same cold command to dance. Instead, she found a low table set with 2 cups, a silver pot of mint tea, a plate of dates, and a bowl of warm bread. He was already seated on the cushions. He gestured to the place across from him. "Sit!" She did not move. "Your Highness, I am here to dance. Tonight you are here to eat. I have already eaten. Then sit and pretend." His amber eyes lifted to hers. "I will not touch you, Layla. I gave you my word 3 weeks ago, and I have kept it. Sit down, drink the tea. Tell me one thing about yourself I do not already know, and then you may go." She lowered herself onto the cushion across from him, because her legs would not hold her any longer. She kept her eyes on the silver pot. Her hands stayed in her lap. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Why are you not commanding me? Why are you not punishing me for refusing the bond?" Rashid was quiet for a long time. He poured her tea before he answered. He did not pour his own. "Because the bond is not a chain, Layla. It is not a leash. I will not have my mate come to me out of fear. I would rather die alone than have you in my arms, because you were ordered there." He set down the pot. "When you stay, I want it to be because you chose to stay, and if you can never choose me, then I will let you go. But you will at least sit with me first. You will at least let me know who I have lost." Something inside her broke open. Something small. Something she had been guarding for years. She looked up at him, finally, properly, and she saw not a sheikh, but a man with shadows under his amber eyes, a man whose hands were folded carefully in his lap so that they would not reach for her, a man who was, in his own quiet, unbreakable way, asking. "My mother used to hum a song," she said. "I do not remember her face, I do not remember my father, but I remember the song. And when the moon is full, I dream of her humming it, and in the dream, the lanterns of our village all light themselves at the same time." Rashid's breath caught. Lanterns light themselves. In the dream. "Layla," he leaned forward very slightly. "Has it ever happened when you were awake?" She looked at her hands. "I do not wish to speak of it." "Has it?" "Sometimes." He nodded slowly, and she saw him filing the information away as gently as a man placing a fragile object into a velvet box. He did not press her. He did not ask anything else. He poured himself tea finally, and they sat in silence until the candles burned low. When she stood to leave, he stood with her. He walked her to the door of his chamber as if she were an honored guest and not a maid in a blue tunic, and he opened the door himself. "Good night, Layla." "Good night, Sheikh al-Khattab." "Rashid." She blinked. "When we are alone," he said quietly, "you will call me Rashid. That is not a command, it is a request." She did not answer. But the next night, when she arrived at his chamber, she said very softly, "Good night, Rashid." Before she left, and the smile that crossed his face afterward, after the door closed and he was alone, was the smile of a man who had just been given the desert. A week passed. They ate together. They spoke. He told her about the border wars and the brother he had lost in them. She told him about the village fire and the song she could not forget. He did not touch her. He did not press her. The bond between them grew warm and steady, like a hearth fire banked for the night, and Layla began to feel something she had never felt before in her life. She began to feel safe. That was when the raiders came. It was the 18th night. Layla was walking back from his chamber to the servants' quarters when she heard the first shout, the first scream, the first crash of steel against steel. She froze in the corridor as a guard ran past her, blood on his sleeve, eyes wide. Behind him she saw torches. Strange men, too many strange men. The eastern gate had fallen. "Layla!" Rashid's voice. He was running toward her down the corridor, his sword already drawn, his robes torn at the shoulder, where someone had caught him with a blade. His amber eyes locked onto hers, and the bond between them flared so hard she gasped. "Get behind me," he ordered. "Now!" She moved without thinking. She pressed herself to his back. His free arm came around her, pulling her close against his side as he turned to face the corridor. 3 raiders rounded the corner. He killed the first before the man understood what had happened. The second fell beneath his blade a heartbeat later, but the third was not alone. 5 more poured in behind him, and Rashid, even as alpha as he was only one man. He fought. He fought beautifully, brutally, the way a lion fights when its mate is at its back. But there were too many. Something heavy struck the side of his head. Layla screamed his name. He went down to one knee. They seized her by the hair and dragged her away from him. And the last thing she saw before they bound her wrists was Rashid reaching for her with bloody fingers, his amber eyes burning, his lips forming her name. When she woke hours later, she was tied wrist to wrist with him in the back of a wooden cart, jolting through the open desert beneath a sky full of indifferent stars, and the bond between them, no longer banked, was beginning to burn. The cart smelled of leather and horses and old blood. Layla opened her eyes slowly. Her cheek was pressed to a rough wool blanket, and the sky above her was the deep purple that only the desert wears at the edge of dawn. Stars were fading. The air was cold, the way only desert air is cold, the kind of cold that gets inside the bones. Her wrists hurt. They had been bound with thick rope, and the rope had been tied to a second pair of wrists. She turned her head and saw him. Rashid was lying on his side beside her, his hands bound to hers, a dark bruise blooming on his temple. He was awake. His amber eyes had been waiting for her to open hers. "You are all right," he said softly. It was not a question. The bond between them was telling him already. He could feel her heart, her breath, the ache in her shoulder where they had wrenched her arm. "Do not speak. There are 8 of them. 2 ride ahead, 6 ride behind. I do not know who they serve, but they do not wear the colors of any house I know." "Where are we?" she whispered. "East. Maybe a day's ride from the palace. Maybe more. They drugged the water they gave us. I think you slept for half a day." She swallowed. Her throat was dry. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing that matters." His amber eyes held hers. "Listen to me, Layla. Whatever happens, whatever they do not fight them yet. Do not show them what you can do. Do you understand?" She blinked. What I can do. I cannot do anything. I am only Layla." His voice was very quiet. "I felt it the night you put your hand on my chest. I have felt it every night since. Whatever is sleeping in you, it is not small. It is not nothing. And right now, it is the only thing that may save us. So listen, wait, watch. When the moment comes, do not be afraid of yourself." She stared at him. The man who had once ordered her to dance was now telling her with bound hands that there was a fire inside her and that he was not afraid of it. She did not know what to do with that. She did not know what to do with the way her chest ached every time he looked at her. The cart jolted to a halt. A guttural voice shouted in a dialect Layla did not know. Then a raider, with a long curved knife and a face wrapped in dark cloth, pulled the back of the cart open and yanked them both out by the rope between their wrists. They fell onto the sand. The other raiders dismounted and gathered around. There were 8 of them, just as Rashid had said. The leader was a tall, thin man, with a scar running from his ear to his collarbone. He smiled when he looked down at Rashid. Sheikh al-Khattab. He spoke in the common tongue now, slow and pleased. "We have been hunting you for 2 seasons. Do you know what your head is worth in the markets of Hadran?" Rashid said nothing. "And the girl." The scarred man crouched down and gripped Layla's chin between his fingers. She felt Rashid's whole body go rigid against the ropes. "The girl is a bonus, pretty thing, quiet thing. We will sell her separately." "No, touch her again," Rashid said, and his voice had dropped to something below human, "and I will kill every man in this camp before the sun rises." The scarred man laughed and let her go. He stood up and waved his hand, and the raiders began making camp. They dragged Rashid and Layla to a wooden stake driven into the sand, and they tied the rope between their wrists to the stake itself. They threw a half-empty water skin between them. They built a fire on the other side of the camp and began to cook something that smelled of smoke and old fat. Then they ignored the prisoners and began to drink. The sun rose, the sun climbed. The sun began to fall toward the western dunes, and still the raiders drank and laughed and did not look at the prisoners except to grin in their direction now and again. The sand grew hot. The rope chafed. Layla's lips cracked, and inside her chest the bond burned. It was not warm any longer. It was not gentle. Every breath Rashid took beside her, every brush of his bound hand against hers, every time his amber eyes found hers and softened, every one of those things was setting her on fire. Something inside her was trying to claw its way out. Something inside her was banging against her ribs from the inside and screaming to be let loose. "Rashid," she whispered, "something is wrong with me." "Nothing is wrong with you, my heart. It hurts. I know. It hurts because of you, because of the bond, because you are too close, and I have not let it. I know." His amber eyes were full of a tenderness she had never seen on any face in her life. "Layla, look at me." She looked at him. Tears were running down her face, and she did not remember crying. "I love you," he said. The words came out very plain and very calm, as if he were telling her the time. "I have loved you since the first night you danced for me. I would have loved you if you had never let me near you again. I love you now, tied to a stake in the middle of the desert, and I will love you tomorrow if we are still alive, and the day after, and every day after that for the rest of my life. You do not have to love me back. You do not have to accept the bond, but I want you to know, before whatever happens next, that you have been loved, truly, by me, completely." Something inside Layla cracked open like a seed, splitting in fire, and the wind, which had been still all afternoon, began to rise. The wind began as a whisper, a small lift of sand at the edge of the camp, a sigh that brushed the manes of the tethered horses, a thin breath that made the fire flicker once and recover. None of the raiders noticed. They were laughing. They were drinking. The scarred man was carving a piece of meat from a black iron pan, and his men were passing a clay jug between them, and not one of them looked up at the sky. Layla felt it first, not as wind, as recognition. The desert was reaching for her. She turned her face slowly to Rashid. Her amber eyes were glowing again, not faintly this time, steadily, like the lanterns in his chamber on the first night. He saw it, and his breath caught. "Layla, something is happening to me. I know. Let it. I'm afraid. I know that too." His bound hand found hers in the sand. He could not hold her properly. The ropes would not allow it. But he laced his fingers through hers as best he could, and he squeezed. "I am here. I am not going anywhere. Whatever you become, I am here. Do you understand me, my heart? Rashid, I do not know what I am. Then we will find out together." His amber eyes did not waver. "Together, Layla. Do you hear me? Say it." "Together," she whispered. The wind doubled. One of the raiders looked up, frowning. He elbowed the man beside him. They both stood. The horses began to stamp and shift, ears pinned back. The scarred man rose slowly from beside the fire, his hand drifting to the curved blade at his belt. "Storm," he said. coming fast. It was not a storm. It was Layla. She closed her eyes. She did not know how she knew what to do. She did not know how her body suddenly remembered something her mind had never been taught. The song her mother had hummed rose inside her chest, and the lanterns of the dream lit themselves one by one inside her ribs, and the bond she had spent 3 weeks trying to break, opened all the way for the first time, and Rashid's strength poured through it into her like water poured into a parched well. Sand lifted from the dunes around the camp. Not a handful, not a swirl. Whole sheets of sand, rising into the air like curtains drawn up to the sky. The wind that had been a whisper became a roar. The fire went out. The horses screamed. The clay jug shattered against the ground. "Sheikh!" one of the raiders shouted. "What is—" The scarred man turned toward the prisoners. His eyes widened. The girl tied to the stake was glowing, not metaphorically. Light was coming out of her. Soft amber light, the same color as her eyes, flickering along her skin like flame trapped under water. The Alpha beside her was watching her with an expression the scarred man could not read, an expression that was neither fear nor surprise, but something far older. Pride, devotion, the look of a man who had always known. "Kill her!" the scarred man shouted. "Kill her now!" 2 raiders ran toward the stake with blades drawn. They did not reach it. The wind hit them like a wall. They were lifted off their feet and flung backward into the dark, and the sound they made when they landed was not a sound any of the others wished to think about. The sandstorm rose. It rose around the camp in a perfect spiral, the eye of it directly above Layla, and the walls of it thickened until the raiders could not see one another through the swirling gold. They shouted. They fired arrows blind into the storm. Nothing returned. The horses tore loose from their tethers and bolted into the dunes. The scarred man, who had survived 3 wars and 40 raids, fell to his knees and began to pray. Inside the eye of the storm, Layla opened her eyes. Her wrists snapped free of the ropes as if the ropes were made of wet paper. Rashid's bonds fell open beside her. He sat up slowly, watching her, not afraid, never afraid. The light along her skin pulsed in time with her heart, and her heart was pulsing in time with his. "Easy," he murmured. "Easy, my heart. They cannot hurt us now. Bring it down slowly, slowly, Layla. The desert is yours. You do not have to prove it twice." She looked at him. The wind softened a little. "Breathe with me," he said. "In, out, like this. With me, Layla. With me." She breathed. The wind eased. The sand began to fall, sheet by sheet, like a curtain coming down at the end of a play. The light along her skin dimmed. Her amber eyes stayed amber, but they no longer glowed. The eye of the storm widened until it had swallowed the whole camp, and then it simply was not a storm anymore. It was only a desert at sunset, and a fire long out, and 8 men lying very still on the sand, and 1 stake snapped in half, and 2 people sitting very close to one another with their hands still laced together. Layla turned her face to Rashid and whispered, "I think I am ready now." And he understood, in a single heartbeat, exactly what she meant. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The desert was utterly quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes after a great wind has spoken. The sky above them was deepening into indigo, and the first stars were beginning to show themselves, careful and shy, as if they too had been hiding from the storm. Rashid lifted her hand carefully and turned it over. Her palm was unmarked. Her wrist where the rope had been was unmarked. The light that had moved beneath her skin was gone, but he could feel it now in a way he could not before. A banked fire, steady, alive. He pressed his lips against the inside of her wrist, and Layla, who had fled from him for 3 weeks, did not pull away. "Tell me what you mean," he said softly. "Say it, so that I am sure." "I am ready to be marked." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "I am ready to be your mate. I am ready to stop running." "Layla, I tried to break the bond, Rashid. I went to the Spice Woman. She told me I could not. She told me only death could break it, and even then only sometimes. And I was angry. I was so angry, because I had spent my whole life being no one, and I did not know how to be someone's." She drew a shaking breath. "But you let me eat. You let me speak. You did not touch me until I asked. You let me be afraid. And tonight you told me you loved me when there was no time left to lie about it. And I felt it, Rashid. I felt it through the bond. You meant every word. Every word. Then I want it." Her amber eyes filled. "I want the mark. I want the bond. I want you. I want to be Layla al-Khattab, and not Layla the maid, and not Layla the orphan, but Layla yours. And I want to be it now, in the desert, with the storm still falling, before I lose my courage." Rashid lifted her hand to his cheek and held it there. He closed his eyes for one breath, 2, 3. When he opened them, the amber in them was the steadiest light in the world. "Then come here, my heart." He drew her gently into his lap. She came willingly. He pressed his forehead to hers, and the bond between them pulsed warm and gold and full. He cupped the back of her neck with one hand and brushed her long black hair forward over her shoulder, baring the curve where her neck met her shoulder. She tilted her head for him. She did not flinch. "It will hurt for a moment," he said. "I know. And then it will not hurt again. I know. I love you, Layla. I love you, Rashid." He kissed her, once, softly, on the mouth, the first kiss either of them had ever shared with anyone. And then he lowered his lips to her shoulder. She felt the gentle press of his teeth, the careful, sharp point of an alpha's bite, and then a single bright burst of pain that lasted no longer than a heartbeat. And after the pain, warmth. After the warmth, light. Layla felt the bond between them lock into place, as if a key had been turned in a lock that had been waiting for it for 23 years. Every hidden, hungry, lonely corner of her chest filled with him, and every closed door of his filled with her, and the two of them together became something neither of them could have been alone. When he lifted his head, his lips were touched with a single drop of red, and he kissed it gently away from her skin, and he murmured words against the new mark that sealed it. The bite would heal into a small crescent moon, the symbol of his pack. Forever. Hers. His. Layla pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were wet. She was smiling. "Mine," she whispered. "Yours," he answered. "Always." What unfolded between them next, beneath the great desert moon and the watchful silver of the stars, cannot be told on this platform. Some moments belong only to the two souls who lived them, and to those readers brave enough to walk a little further into the heart of this story. The desert itself bent low around the two lovers that night, and the wind held its breath, and the very sand beneath them remembered. Studios Aurora has placed the rest of that night, the cries, the whispers, the tender claiming of a maid who had finally chosen her king, and a king who had finally found his queen, in a place where it can be read in full, far from the eyes of any platform that would silence it. By the time dawn began to soften the eastern dunes, Layla lay curled against Rashid's chest, his cloak drawn around them both, the bite mark on her shoulder healed into the small crescent moon of his pack. Forever. Hers. His. A horse stepped quietly out of the dunes behind them. One of the raiders' mounts, the same grey mare Rashid had noticed earlier, returning calm now, head lowered, reins trailing in the sand. She walked up to Layla and pressed her muzzle into Layla's palm, as if she had decided all on her own who her new rider was. Layla laughed softly and stroked the mare's nose. "I think the desert has chosen too," Rashid said. "Then we ride. Then we ride." He helped her to her feet. They were both bruised, both sand-burned, both exhausted. But they were standing, and they were whole, and they were bound. Rashid mounted first and reached down for her, and Layla swung up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist, and the grey mare turned her head west toward the only road that mattered, the road home. Behind them, the broken stake leaned in the sand. The fire pit was cold. The 8 men did not stir. The desert had taken its judgment, and the desert had been satisfied. As the grey mare carried them away from the camp into the deep blue of the desert night, Layla pressed her cheek between Rashid's shoulder blades and felt, for the first time in her life, that she was being carried towards something. But neither of them knew that someone in the palace had already begun preparing for their return, and not all of those preparations were welcoming. They rode through the night. Rashid knew the dunes the way other men knew the streets of their own cities, and he guided the grey mare by stars and instinct, never hurrying her, always keeping her at a steady walk. Layla rested her cheek against his back and listened to the sound of his heart through the layers of his torn robe. The bond between them hummed with a low, contented warmth, and for long stretches she did not think at all. She only existed. She only belonged. Once near the middle of the night she began to cry without meaning to. He felt it through the bond before she made a sound. He stopped the mare. He turned in the saddle and gathered her against his chest. "What is it, my heart?" "I do not know. I am not sad." "I know you are not. It is only that I have never been held this way, by anyone, ever. And I did not know that a person could feel this much and not break." He kissed the top of her head. "You will feel it every day from now until the end of our days. You will get used to it, and on the days when it is too much, I will hold you until it is less. That is what we are now, Layla. That is what we will always be." She nodded against him and did not say anything for a long time. They rode on. By dawn, the silhouette of Zarwan began to rise from the western horizon, white walls turning gold in the rising sun, towers thin as needles, the 4 great minarets of the city, the palace itself crowning the highest hill, its dome catching the first light like a held breath. Layla had walked those walls 100 times in the past 6 years. She had carried trays through those gates. She had folded silks in those upper rooms. She had been invisible inside that palace for so long that she had almost convinced herself she was nothing. She was no longer nothing. Today she would ride through those gates as the chosen mate of the Alpha, marked, bonded, awakened. The thought made her stomach turn over. "They will not know what to do with me," she whispered. "Then we will teach them." Rashid did not turn his head. "Listen to me carefully, Layla. The court will not all welcome you. There are houses in this city that have offered me their daughters since I was 18 years old. There are counselors who have written marriage contracts for me without my permission. There will be those who say a maid cannot stand beside an alpha. There will be those who try to whisper poison into the spaces between us." His voice softened. "They will fail. Do you know why? Why? Because the bond is mine and yours, and no one else's. Because you raised a sandstorm out of the desert with your own breath. Because I love you more than I love my throne, and I will say so out loud, in front of every counselor in the kingdom, on the day you ask me to. They will not break us, my heart. Nothing will break us. Do you trust me? I trust you. Then ride into the city with your head up. You are not a maid. You are not an orphan. You are the Luna of the Crescent Pack, the mate of Sheikh Rashid al-Khattab, and the desert itself has bowed to you. Do not lower your eyes for anyone." She nodded. She straightened her shoulders. The grey mare carried them through the eastern gate at the full of the morning, and the guards on the walls saw them and stared, and the runners ran ahead of them through the streets, shouting that the Sheikh had returned, that the Sheikh was alive, that the Sheikh was riding with a woman behind him whose hair was full of sand and whose eyes glowed faintly even in daylight. The streets filled. The merchants stopped their wagons. The children climbed onto crates. By the time the grey mare reached the palace courtyard, half of Zarwan had come to see them. Tariq was waiting on the steps. So was the head housekeeper. So was every senior councillor of the kingdom, hastily assembled, robes thrown on, faces pale. Rashid swung down from the mare and turned to lift Layla down himself, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. He did not let go of her hand when her feet touched the ground. He did not let go of her hand when he turned to face his court. "My Sheikh," Tariq said carefully, his eyes flickering between Rashid and Layla and the visible mark on her shoulder where her tunic had torn. We feared the worst. The reports said... The reports were correct. We were taken. We were carried east. We escaped." "How?" one of the councillors asked, an older man in deep green robes. "How did you escape 8 armed men in the open desert, Sheikh?" Rashid did not answer right away. He turned and looked at Layla. His amber eyes were unreadable to the court, but full of light to her. He squeezed her hand. "My mate brought down a sandstorm and buried them where they stood." The silence that followed was the deepest silence the palace had ever known. The councillors did not breathe. The housekeeper covered her mouth with one hand. The crowd in the courtyard pressed forward, straining to hear. Rashid lifted Layla's hand and turned to address them all. "This is Layla Nasri al-Khattab. She is my fated mate. She is your Luna. She carries a gift our histories have not seen in 100 years. She will stand beside me. She will be honored as my wife the moment the rites can be prepared. Anyone who has a problem with this may speak it now, in this courtyard, in front of every soul present. I will hear you. I will answer you, and then we will move on." The councillor in green robes stepped forward and opened his mouth to speak, and Layla, watching him, felt through the new mate bond a sudden cold flicker of something that did not belong to her or to Rashid, and she realized, with a jolt that ran through her bones, that the man in green robes was not afraid of her or surprised by her. He had been expecting her. The councillor in the green robes was named Hadi al-Munir. He had served 3 alphas in his lifetime. He was 62 years old. He had a long grey beard and clever eyes, and he spoke as he stepped forward in the slow, measured way of a man who had been preparing his sentences for many days. "My Sheikh." He bowed. He did not bow deeply. "Forgive my words, but the kingdom requires honesty. A Luna is not a title given lightly. A Luna stands beside her alpha in matters of state. A Luna is presented to the pack, blessed by the elders, accepted by the council. A maid from the kitchens, however gifted, however blessed by accident with... Speak more carefully, Hadi. My Sheikh, I mean no insult. I only ask that the council be permitted to verify her gift, to witness it, to confirm that what occurred in the desert was not, let us say, a coincidence of weather. The kingdom has enemies, enemies who would gladly place a false Luna at your side to gain influence. We must be certain." Rashid's amber eyes did not move from Hadi's face. Layla felt the bond between them tighten, careful, controlled. He was angry. He was very angry. But he was holding it the way a master smith holds molten iron, perfectly still in the tongs. "You wish her tested." "I wish her witnessed, my Sheikh. There is a difference." "Tell me the difference." "A test would mean she must prove herself or be cast out. A witnessing means she demonstrates her gift before the council, and the council records what they have seen. No outcome other than confirmation, no threat to her standing." Layla felt the cold flicker again through the bond. It was not coming from Hadi. It was coming from somewhere behind him, a younger counselor she did not yet know the name of, a man with a thin face and eyes that did not quite meet anyone else's. The lunar gift inside her, newly awake and still finding its shape, told her with absolute clarity that this man was lying about something, not Hadi, the other one, the thin-faced one. She squeezed Rashid's hand once. He felt it. He understood without needing words. "I will agree to a witnessing," he said, "but not today. Today my mate will bathe and eat and rest and be tended by the healers. Tomorrow at midday she will demonstrate her gift in the Great Hall before the full council. You will all be there. All of you, Hadi. Every councillor on the registry. No exceptions. Is that understood?" "Understood, my Sheikh. And one more thing." Rashid's voice dropped a little. "If a single one of you whispers against her between now and tomorrow midday, I will know. The bond between us will tell her, and she will tell me, and I will deal with that councillor personally. Carry that warning to anyone who needs to hear it." Hadi bowed again, more deeply this time, and stepped back into the line. The thin-faced councillor did not bow. He only watched. Layla watched him back without seeming to. The crowd in the courtyard parted as Rashid led her up the steps and into the palace. The housekeeper, weeping openly now, fell into step behind them. Tariq followed at a respectful distance. The great doors closed behind them, and the noise of the city was muffled to a hum, and Layla finally let her shoulders soften. "Rashid, I know my heart. I felt it through the bond. The man behind Hadi. He is hiding something." "Yes." "He was not surprised that you came back with a mate." "No, he was not." Rashid's amber eyes were thoughtful. "Tariq, find me the name of the thin councillor in the back of the line, the one in the dark blue. Find me his correspondence for the past 3 months. Find me his servants. Find me everyone who has visited his rooms. Quietly, now." "Yes, my Sheikh." The housekeeper, whose name was Madame Yusra, took Layla's free hand in both of hers and pressed it to her own cheek, weeping. "Forgive me, my Luna. Forgive me. I scolded you in the kitchens. I sent you to him without knowing. Forgive me." Layla, who had spent 6 years being scolded by this woman, who had been struck by this woman more than once with a wooden spoon, who had been told she was useless and slow and forgettable 1,000 times, looked down into the housekeeper's tear-stained face and felt to her own surprise no anger at all, only a strange, quiet pity. "There is nothing to forgive, Madame Yusra. I was a maid yesterday. Today I am something else. Yesterday is finished." The housekeeper kissed her hand and led her away to the bathing rooms. The healers cleaned the bite mark on her shoulder and pronounced it perfect, a sealed bond, the cleanest they had seen in 20 years. They washed the sand from her hair and combed it out. They wrapped her in soft cotton and brought her honey and almonds and warm milk. They put her into a bed wider than the entire room she had slept in for 6 years, in a chamber with a balcony that overlooked the inner garden, and they told her that she was the Luna now, and that the bed and the balcony and the garden were hers, and that the Sheikh would come to her when the moon was high. She fell asleep before sundown. She woke at moonrise to the sound of his footsteps in the doorway. He sat carefully on the edge of her bed, still dressed, the council session evidently long. The bond between them warmed. She reached for his hand without opening her eyes, and he took it and pressed her knuckles against his lips. "How are you, my heart?" "Tired, strange, happy, frightened." "All 4 together?" "All 4 together." He smiled. She felt him smile through the bond before she heard it in his voice. "Then you are exactly where you should be. Sleep again. Tomorrow we face them. Tonight you are only mine, and I am only yours, and the rest of the world can wait until the sun comes up." As Layla drifted back into sleep, The thin-faced counselor in the dark blue robes was meeting in a back room of the lower city with a man whose face was wrapped in cloth, a man who carried, hidden in his sleeve, a small vial of liquid the color of a sandstorm at sunset. Midday came. The great hall of the palace was filled. Every counsellor of the Crescent Pack stood in his appointed place along the marble columns. The household was gathered in the back. Tariq stood at Rashid's right hand with a folded parchment tucked into his sash, and Madame Yusra stood near the rear pillars with the entire kitchen staff, every one of whom had once given Layla a hard word, and every one of whom now stood with damp eyes and folded hands. Layla entered through the side door, dressed in the deep blue and silver of the Crescent Pack. Her long black hair had been braided with strands of small silver coins. The mark on her shoulder had been left visible by the cut of the gown, on Rashid's quiet instruction. Her amber eyes were calm. She walked the length of the hall alone, and she did not lower her gaze for any face in the crowd, and when she reached the dais, she turned and stood beside Rashid, as if she had stood there all her life. Hadi al-Munir bowed. "My Luna, the Council thanks you for your willingness to be witnessed. We ask only that you demonstrate your gift in some small way so that the record may be set. What would the Council ask me to do? Something simple. The lighting of the lanterns of this hall, perhaps, without flame." There were 200 lanterns hanging from the vaulted ceiling. They had not been lit on Hadi's instruction so that the demonstration would be visible. Layla looked up at them. She looked back at Hadi. She did not smile. Very well. She did not raise her hands. She did not close her eyes. She only breathed in once, slowly, and the bond between her and Rashid pulsed warm. And then every lantern in the hall lit at the same instant, all 200, in a single soft burst of amber light. The council gasped. The household behind them gasped. Madame Yusra clapped a hand over her mouth. Hadi bowed very deeply. "It is witnessed. The lunar gift is true. The record will reflect it. The council will accept her presentation as Luna of the Crescent Pack at the next moon ceremony." "Wait!" Layla had not raised her voice, but the room went quiet anyway. She turned, slowly, and looked toward the back of the council, toward the thin-faced man in the dark blue robes. "There is one more thing the witnessing should record," she said. "Counselor, I do not yet know your name." "The thin one, in the blue." "Counselor Bashir, my Luna," Bashir said, his face very still. "Counselor Bashir, step forward, please." He hesitated. He stepped forward. "Empty your sleeves." The room held its breath. Bashir's face went the color of old wax. "My Luna, this is most irregular. Empty your sleeves, Counselor." Rashid had not moved. He did not need to. The bond between them was thrumming with a clear, calm certainty, and his amber eyes were fixed on Bashir with a patience that was not patient at all. Bashir's hand twitched toward his sash. Then it twitched the other way. He glanced at the doors. 2 guards moved smoothly to block them. Tariq stepped down from the dais with one hand on the parchment in his belt. "Counselor Bashir, we have been examining your correspondence since yesterday morning," Tariq said quietly. 3 letters in the last 6 weeks to a man named Faris of Hadran. 2 payments of gold received from Hadran couriers. A meeting last night in the lower city with a man whose face was wrapped in cloth. Would the councillor like to explain himself to the hall, or shall I read the letters aloud? Bashir lunged for the door. He did not reach it. The guards had him before his second step. They wrestled his arms back, and a small glass vial fell from his sleeve and rolled across the marble floor and stopped at the foot of the dais. The liquid inside was the color of a sandstorm at sunset. Layla looked down at it and felt, through the lunar gift, a wrongness so deep that her stomach turned. "Poison," she said softly, "for the wedding cup, the moon ceremony cup." Rashid's jaw tightened. "Is that true, Bashir?" Bashir said nothing. He did not need to. Tariq unrolled the parchment in his hand and read aloud, and what he read was very clear. And what he read named not only Bashir, but the leader of the raiders in the desert, a man called the Scarred One of Hadron, who had been paid in advance to bring back the Sheikh's head and the head of any woman foolish enough to be at his side. The hall did not erupt. The hall stayed dreadfully quiet. Hadi al-Munir, who had known Bashir for 20 years, lowered his head and said only, "Take him to the cells." The guards took him. Layla turned to Rashid. The bond between them was steady, but she was trembling. He drew her against his side without speaking, and they stood there in front of the council until the doors had closed behind Bashir and the marshal of the guard had given his salute. Then Rashid lifted her chin gently with one finger. "You knew. I felt it the moment we returned. I did not know what. You saved my life today. You saved mine first, in the desert. Then we are even, my heart. We will never be even, Rashid. We will only be together." He laughed. It was the second time she had ever heard him laugh, and the sound of it made the bond between them ring like a bell. He pressed his forehead to hers in front of every councillor of the kingdom, and he did not care what any of them thought. And the council watching did not say a single word. That night, walking together through the inner garden under a sky full of stars, Layla stopped beside the fountain and turned to him and whispered, "Rashid, there is something I have not told you about my mother." And the bond between them went very, very still. The fountain in the inner garden was old, older than the palace itself. The water came from a spring deep beneath the hill, and the carved stones around its rim had been worn smooth by the hands of every alpha who had ever ruled in Zarwan. Layla had walked past this fountain 100 times in her old life, carrying baskets, carrying laundry, carrying nothing at all. She had never once been allowed to sit beside it. Tonight she sat on its rim, her bare feet on the warm stone, and Rashid sat beside her, and the moon overhead was full, and the bond between them was a quiet golden thread. "Tell me about your mother, my heart." Layla looked at her hands. They were no longer the hands of a maid. The calluses were softening already. The nails had been tended. She turned her palms over slowly, as if she might find the truth written in them. "My mother's name was Nadia. She was a healer in our village. The other women came to her when they were sick, when they could not sleep, when their children would not stop crying. She put her hands on them, and they were better. I did not understand, when I was small, that this was unusual. I thought every mother could do it." She drew a breath. "There was a man in our village who hated her. I do not remember why. I was only 5 years old. He told the others she was a witch. He told them she made the lanterns light themselves. He told them she had bewitched the well, and that was why our village had clean water when the others did not. The other villages began to whisper. The whisper became a fire." Rashid said nothing. He did not interrupt. He laid his hand over hers on the stone. "I do not remember the night they came. I remember running. I remember my mother pushing me into a chest of grain in our cellar and telling me to be quiet, to be quiet, to be quiet, no matter what I heard." She closed the lid. "I remember the sound of the door above and the shouting, and then I remember nothing, not for a long time. When I came out, the village was burned. Everyone was dead, everyone." Her voice did not waver, but a tear slipped down her cheek. "The men who took me afterward, the slavers, they said it had been a sandstorm, that a great wind came from nowhere and buried everyone. They said it was a miracle that I had survived. They sold me at the market in Zarwan. The palace brought me to work in the kitchens. I was 6. She turned her face to him. "Rashid, I think it was not a sandstorm. I think it was my mother. I think when they came for her, she did what I did in the desert, and she did not bring it down again. I think she gave her life so that the men who killed her would not leave. And I think I think my gift is hers. I think she sent it forward, into me, before she went." Rashid lifted her hand and pressed it against his chest, exactly above his heart, the way she had pressed it the first night in his chamber. The mate bond pulsed under her fingers. "Then your mother is here too," he said quietly. "Your mother is in your bones. Your mother saved you twice, my heart, once by hiding you in the chest, and once by giving you what you needed to bring down a storm of your own when the time came. She is part of this. She is part of us." Layla bowed her head. She wept softly. He did not try to stop her. He held her, and the moon climbed, and the fountain whispered, and after a long time she lifted her head and looked at him with eyes that were swollen but clear. "I have spent my whole life being ashamed that I survived. I have spent my whole life thinking I was nothing because I was the one who got out. You were never nothing. I know that now. Say it again. I was never nothing." Her voice steadied. "I am not nothing. I'm Nadia's daughter, and I'm the Luna of the Crescent Pack, and I am Rashid al-Khattab's wife." "Wife," he said softly. "Not yet. Soon. Very soon." She smiled through the tears. He kissed her gently on the mouth and on the forehead, and on the bite mark at her shoulder that had healed already into the small crescent moon of his pack. They sat for a long while afterward, side by side, with the bond between them, humming steady and warm, and the great moon full above them, and the desert beyond the walls turning silver in the night. Tariq came at last. He bowed at the edge of the garden, as discreetly as he could. "My Sheikh, my Luna. The preparations for the moon ceremony are complete. The elders have arrived from the southern villages. The kitchens are ready. The councillors who supported Bashir have been quietly removed from their posts. Hadi al-Munir asks the honor of presenting the Luna to the elders himself, if she will permit it." Layla looked at Rashid. He nodded once. "Tell Hadi I would be honored," she said. "And Tariq, send a rider to the eastern road. There are 8 men buried in the sand a day's ride out. They had families, perhaps. Send word to whatever villages will claim them. They were our enemies, but they were once also someone's sons. Let their mothers, if they have mothers, know." Tariq blinked. He bowed deeply. "It will be done, my Luna." He left. Rashid looked at her with a quiet, full pride. "You will be a great Luna, my heart." "I will try." "You will be." On the night of the moon ceremony, beneath 200 lanterns, and the eyes of every soul in Zarwan, Layla stood in white silk beside her Alpha. And just as Hadi al-Munir began the binding words, a single rider tore into the courtyard on a foam-covered horse, shouting that the southern villages were burning and that the men who had hired Bashir had not been working alone. The hall went still. Hadi al-Munir's voice trailed off mid-blessing. The 200 lanterns above them did not flicker. Layla turned, slowly, in her white silk, and the rider in the courtyard was already half off his horse, blood on his sleeve, his eyes wild. "My Sheikh, my Luna, the southern villages. Faris of Hadron has crossed the border with 200 men. He is burning the wells. He says he will not stop until the Sheikh and his witch bride are dead." The hall did not erupt. The hall held its breath. Rashid turned to Layla. She turned to him. The bond between them rang like a struck bell. He did not panic. He did not even raise his voice. He lifted her hand and kissed the back of it, in front of the council and the elders, and the entire household and the city beyond the doors. And he said, very calmly, "My heart, our wedding will wait. Our pack will not. Then we ride. Together." Together. Hadi al-Munir, who had not been certain about Layla 3 days earlier, who had asked for a witnessing instead of a test, looked at his Sheikh and his new Luna standing hand in hand on the dais, and he made a decision that he would later say was the wisest of his long life. "Then bind them now," he said firmly. "The blessing is half finished. Finish it. Let them ride to war as husband and wife, not as Sheikh and Luna-to-be. The pack rides better behind a married alpha. Bind them now in the time it takes a horse to be saddled." Rashid looked at Layla. Layla looked at Rashid. "Yes," she whispered. Hadi spoke the binding words. They were old words. They were short words. They were the words that had bound every Alpha and Luna of the Crescent Pack since the first Alpha had taken the first Luna 1,000 years before. He spoke of moonlight and sand. He spoke of breath and bone. He spoke of two becoming one, and one becoming a pack, and a pack becoming a kingdom. Layla did not understand all of the words, but she felt them. The bond between her and Rashid widened with every line, and by the last word it was not a thread any longer. It was a river. It was a whole sky. Rashid kissed her, hard, in front of everyone. The hall did not cheer. The hall did not have time. The hall ran for its weapons. They rode south at the head of 300 warriors. Layla rode beside her husband on the grey mare from the desert. She wore a tunic and trousers of black and silver under a cloak of the deepest blue. Her hair was braided back. Her amber eyes were calm. The battle, when it came, did not last long. Faris of Hadron had counted on surprise. He had counted on a panicked Sheikh and a court divided. He had not counted on a Luna who could lift sand from the dunes with her breathing, and who could hold a wall of wind in front of her husband's army for a full hour while the Crescent Pack archers worked at their leisure. He had not counted on a bond between an alpha and his mate so deep that the warriors of the Crescent Pack felt it through their own pack lines and fought as if every man among them were carrying his own beloved on his back. Faris of Hadron fell at sundown. His men surrendered before the moon rose. The southern villages were saved. 3 of the wells had been spoiled, but they could be cleaned. No villagers had been killed. The bodies of the enemy were treated with the dignity of fallen soldiers on Layla's quiet instruction, and the news of that mercy travelled faster than any sword. The kingdoms beyond the eastern border, who had been weighing whether to side with Hadron, decided overnight to side instead with Zarwan. They rode home in the morning. The pack rode behind them, singing. Rashid's hand never left hers. That night, in the chamber that had once been only his, and was now also hers, he carried her over the threshold himself, even though the threshold was no different from any other doorway, and he laid her down on the cushions beside the fountain, and he held her face in both his hands and looked at her as if he were memorizing every line of her for 100 years to come. Layla al-Khattab, Rashid al-Khattab. I love you. I love you. Forever. Forever. The lanterns above them, of their own accord, dimmed to the softest possible amber, and the bond between them glowed warm and gold and full, and outside the carved doors a guard who had served the Sheikh for 10 years touched the sword at his hip and smiled, because for the first time in those 10 years he believed, truly believed, that the kingdom was going to be all right. 6 months would pass before the night that changed everything for Layla and Rashid would come. The night a maid who had once danced in chains would return to the same chamber, dressed in the same costume she had once worn against her will, to ask her king for something no one had thought she would ever ask. 6 months passed. The southern villages were rebuilt. The wells were cleaned. The councillors who had quietly stood with Bashir were quietly retired, and Hadi al-Munir was named first councillor. Layla spent her mornings in the great library, learning the histories her gift had been waiting for. She spent her afternoons in the inner garden, teaching the kitchen girls to read. Madame Yusra cried every time Layla called her by her first name. Tariq became, against all expectation, Layla's closest friend in the council, and the two of them argued about almost everything. and Rashid watched it all with the contentment of a man who had finally received the family he had not known he was missing. On the night of the first full moon of summer, Madame Yusra came quietly to the inner sitting room where Layla and Rashid had taken to spending their evenings. The fountain whispered, the lanterns hung low. Rashid was reading. Layla was sewing a small thing in her lap. Yusra bowed. "My Luna, the garments you asked for are ready." Layla set down her sewing. "Thank you, Yusra. Have them taken to the small chamber across the corridor, and tell the guards at the doors of the Sheikh's private chamber that no one is to disturb him tonight by any order, for any reason, until I open those doors myself in the morning." "It will be done, my Luna." Yusra bowed and withdrew. Rashid set down his book very slowly. His amber eyes lifted to hers. "My heart, what is this?" Layla smiled. It was a small smile, a private smile. The smile of a woman who has been holding a secret for weeks and is finally ready to give it away. "You once told me, on the night you finally let me eat at your table, that I would never have to dance for you again unless I asked to." Rashid's breath caught. "I remember every word." "Then go to your chamber, my husband. Light the lanterns yourself. Sit in your old place and wait for me." "Layla, go." He went. An hour later, Layla walked through the corridors of the palace as she had walked through them on her very first night 6 months before. Barefoot, long black hair loose past her shoulders, the silver bells on her ankle chains chiming softly with each step. But the woman who walked toward the Sheikh's private chamber tonight was not the maid who had walked there the first time. The guards she passed bowed deeply without lifting their eyes. The maids she passed gathered the hems of their tunics and wept quietly into their hands. The lanterns along the corridor flared a little brighter as she passed, and now everyone in the palace knew exactly why. She wore the same costume she had worn on her first night, the deep blue beaded top with the silver coins, the matching coin belt low on her hips, the flowing chiffon skirt that pooled at her ankles, the silver bells on her ankle chains. Madame Yusra had kept the costume folded carefully in cedar wood for 6 months, against the day her Luna might choose to wear it again. That day had come. The 2 guards at the doors of the Sheikh's private chamber saw her approach and bowed without a word. They had been there the very first night. They were here now to see her walk through these doors again, dressed in the same costume, but transformed. They opened the carved doors for her. They closed the doors behind her. They would not move from their posts again until morning. Inside the chamber, the lanterns burned warm and golden. The fountain whispered. The mosaic floor caught the light. And Rashid al-Khattab stood by the same window where he had stood the very first night. But the Alpha who waited for her now was not the one who had waited then. That Alpha had been a king who commanded. This one was a husband who had been chosen. He turned slowly. His amber eyes found hers, and for a long, long moment neither of them moved. "Layla, tonight, Rashid, I am the one asking." He could not speak. His chest rose and fell. His hand, resting against the carved frame of the window, closed slowly into a fist as if to hold himself in place. Layla walked to the center of the mosaic floor. She lifted her arms slowly. The silver bells on her ankles chimed once, twice, 3 times. And in the chamber where her humiliation had been sealed 6 months ago, in the costume that had once been her cage, beneath the lanterns that had witnessed her first reluctant surrender, Layla danced for the only man she would ever love, and for the first time in her life every step was hers. What unfolded between them in that chamber afterward, beneath the same lanterns that had watched her first dance and now watched her last, cannot be told on this platform. Some moments belong only to the 2 souls who lived them. The whispers of silk against mosaic, the slow falling of silver bells, the way Rashid al-Khattab finally crossed the floor to his Luna and lowered himself to his knees before her, before the maid he had once commanded, before the dancer he had once forced, before the queen he had been chosen by. And the secret Layla had been carrying for weeks, the small things she had been sewing in her lap by the fountain night after night, the news that would change everything for them and for the kingdom. That secret was given that night too, in words that no platform but Patreon will ever be allowed to carry. The crescent moon rose over Zarwan and laid its silver across the dome, and inside the palace a sheikh and his Luna held one another and were, for the length of one perfect breath, exactly where they had always been meant to be. This is the story of Layla and Rashid, from a maid who was never seen to a Luna who could hold the desert in her breath, from a king who commanded a dance to a husband who knelt before his wife, from a bond rejected to a love chosen, from silence to song. But there were two nights in this story that could not be told here. The first was a desert night beneath the great full moon and the watchful silver of the stars, when an alpha and his unwilling mate gave themselves to one another for the very first time, with nothing but the warm sand and the wind as their witnesses, the whispers, the promises pressed into skin, the way Layla finally let her king worship her the way his wolf had been begging him to from the very first dance. The second was a palace night, 6 months later, when a maid who had once danced in chains returned to the same chamber dressed in the same costume and danced for her king as a free woman who had finally chosen to be his. The reciprocity, the reversal, the moment Rashid al-Khattab fell to his knees before her, and the secret she had been carrying that turned the night from a homecoming into a beginning. For the souls who wish to walk beside the lovers into both of those nights, to read, in tender and reverent detail, every breath they shared, every word he murmured against her skin, every tear that turned into a smile, and the news that opened the door to everything that would come next. Studios. Aurora has prepared 2 bonus videos on Patreon, in a place where love can be spoken, about the way love deserves to be spoken about. The links rest in the pinned comment below. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below with your name, the city you are watching from, and the secret word, Dunasong, to prove your soul stayed with Layla until the very last lantern was lit. Tell us what you felt. Tell us which moment made you cry. And subscribe to Studios Aurora so the next love story does not pass you by, because beneath every full moon, somewhere in the world, a fated mate is finding the only heart that will ever truly know theirs. Good night, dear hearts. And until the next moon, love always, under the full moon.